and welcome back to the Cafe Damietta podcast, right here on WVCR 88.3 The Saints. We will dive into the rich tapestries of experiences that shape our identities. I'm your host, Kelyse Mallory, and today I am joined by a current Siena College student. He is a nursing major and a freshman. Today, we'll explore different aspects of his culture by asking engaging questions that reveal the richness and traditions of his daily life. You can listen to the Cafe Damietta podcast, a biweekly show highlighting our different cultures at siena.edu/Damietta. So, Isaiah, we all know how busy it is around this time of the semester, a few weeks after spring break, just trying to get back into the groove of things. So I just appreciate you for taking the time today to spend some time with us and have this interview. I would love to just start with a formal welcome. How are you doing today?
I am doing great, I'm glad that you invited me here, and I'm excited to continue with this podcast.
That's great to hear. Now, for our listeners, can you just give us a little background? How did you end up at Siena, and ultimately, why did you choose Siena?
I'm 18 years old, and how I found out about it, Siena, is just by emails. Got a couple of emails, decided to oh yeah, this looks cool, and I looked into the college. It seemed great. I loved how they showed different forms of communities and how welcoming the college seemed to be. So I was like, okay, let me see what this is about, and I went to Admitted Students Day, and I really enjoyed the experience, and that's how I chose Siena.
Yeah, that's really cool. Part of my decision to come to Siena was part of the emails and just constant reaching out, but it worked out. It's always interesting to hear what draws people to Siena and ultimately why they choose Siena. Now with that, we kind of get a glimpse of your college application process, but can you just provide our listeners with a little bit more background, like what's home like for you and how that has shaped your decision to come to Siena?
Well, I am from Brooklyn, New York, and which is a very large city, one of the largest cities in the world, and it's definitely been a huge culture change coming up here, especially with different types of people, different types of demographics, different cultures and identities. And it's definitely been a unique experience coming to Siena, but overall it's been great. Ethnically, I am from Haiti. I am Haitian. And currently, there's different things going on in Haiti. However, I'm still very proud to be a Haitian American.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that little snippet of what home is here in America and also back home at Haiti. So it's always interesting to know where people are from. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So with that, with you kind of hinting on where you're from, are there any cultural traditions or aspects of home that you really hold on to while you're here at Siena?
Some traditions and cultural aspects that I really hold on to is really creating a community and creating a form of support. One thing that I found here in Siena was the Damietta Cross Cultural Center, and I really have found my home away from home and my support group. And one thing I will always do is make sure that the people that I'm around feel supported and they feel safe and they feel comfortable. And that's something that I grew up with my family and my culture. We're always supporting each other no matter what difficulties, challenges we may go through. So I definitely really value that and want to make sure I hold on to that here in my experience in Siena.
Oh, that's awesome. Shout out to the Damietta Cross Cultural Center. And I'm sure
Woo!
yes, woo! Let's take a moment to applaud. Yes, yes, yes. And I'm sure our listeners can really resonate with the desire to have a community and to be supportive of your peers and to just have that support group at college. I think it's so, so, so important. So thank you so much for sharing that. And it's always interesting how people can connect to their roots while away from home. You know what I mean? So thank you again for sharing. And just before we dive into more specifics of your background, can you just let our listeners know how your Siena experience has been as a Haitian man?
It's definitely been unique. Um, there's not a lot of people from my country here, you know, um, especially in the forms of diversity, into where like I know a lot of people around the area see Siena as like one of the more diverse schools they've been to in comparison to my experience where this is one of the least diverse schools I've been to.
Mm.
However, despite the differences in diversity, I've still seen like me being accepted, just as everyone else has. And I've seen like me being welcomed, me feeling like I'm not being alienated despite being unique in my cultural ethnic background.
Wow. I really appreciate your honesty in that response because it is almost a culture shock, coming to a PWI after not really you live in Brooklyn. You know what I mean? That's very different than Loudonville, New York. So the fact that you're able to speak on those experiences and your own experience is profound. So thank you so much for sharing that. But one thing I do admire about Siena is that despite the different cultural backgrounds, we're all able to come here and there's just something about being a saint. So, are there any clubs or extracurricular activities that you're involved with here at Siena? And if so, do tell.
Yes, yes. Currently I'm involved in the Black Student Union. I am involved in the Damietta Cross Cultural Center. I am involved in the DAC panel. I am also like involved in the Student Nurses Association, as well as taking part in various other projects. I love being involved on campus. It gives me something to do, gives me like a community, it doesn't matter which part of campus I'm on. I always have my little group that I'm around, and is definitely wonderful, is definitely comforting, especially being like 185 miles from home.
Right. Yeah, I like how you said, like, just being involved on campus. I feel like, listeners, if you're out there, having things on campus that you like to do is part of what is going to keep you here for these 4 years. Because if you just come to campus and you're just going to class, you're not going to have as grand of a time as someone who is involved in this program or that program. But it's just so important how campus involvement is what shapes the college experience. Do you agree, Isaiah?
100%, 100%.
Yeah. And, just talking on some of the programs and extracurriculars that you're involved with, have any of those programs helped you grow personally or academically in any way? Or,
Well, one word, it's a Japanese word called kaizen.
mm,
And this word means to constantly improve even if it's minimal or small.
right.
And one thing I found being involved with these communities, I've been able to achieve this and always be constantly improving myself as an individual, as a
Mm,
student, as a brother, as a son. Especially being involved in these communities, I've been able to grow as an individual, grow as a person in Siena campus.
I really appreciate that response. And what was the word?
Kaizen.
Just so interesting, the desire to keep growing and evolving as you progress through life. And thank you so much, Isaiah. And just lastly, before we move on to more specifics of your background, what piece of advice would you give to students who might be struggling to find their place on campus or get involved?
One thing I definitely would give advice for students currently at Siena campus, as well as students considering coming to Siena College, is just attending events. Any event that is on Saints Connect or is on the Student Digest or even a pop up email, just go. You know, even if you don't have like people to go with, or if you don't know like if it'll be fun or not, just go to every event, and eventually you'll meet people. You'll meet your circle.
Yeah, Isaiah, thank you so much for sharing that. It's so important just to go to an event. I cannot tell you how many events I went to, and I ended up finding my people who are still my people even in my senior year.
Mm.
So thank you so much for that. And just before we wrap this moment up, is there any message that you would like to leave to any incoming students or people who are considering Siena College?
My message to the people of Siena College and those considering coming to Siena College is to just come in with an open mind. Come in with an open mind and, be open to the idea of evolving and changing into a new person. This experience is unique at Siena College. It's not something that is necessarily found anywhere else, and just take full advantage of it.
Thank you so much, Isaiah, for your thoughtful responses. And just to kind of like switch gears now, we're just going to talk about a aspect of culture that is often overlooked. Culture isn't just about traditions or language. It's also about the places that we've been to and how those places have impacted us. These places carry history, meaning, and identity. So, for our listeners who may just have tuned in or have zoned out for a little bit, we just wrapped up a conversation about Isaiah's background and his hometown, and now we're just shifting gears to another topic: travel. Isaiah, are you ready to take us on a journey through your experiences?
Yes, yes, I'm really excited to share this.
Awesome. So let's start with this. We're going to start real simple, real easy, real 1, 2, 3, okay? What is one place that you've traveled to that left a lasting impact on you?
One place I have traveled to that left a lasting impact on me was traveling to South Carolina. It was definitely like a wonderful experience, because we was just there just to explore and relax. And I feel like I got to learn a lot about like the history of the place. I got to learn a lot about like different backgrounds and like just different people, like the United States is like very large. You can just
It
go a couple
is.
states down and it feels like you're in another country.
Mm. Yeah, you kind of answered my next question, but just like what about this place made it so special? And you just said like you were there to relax and just explore, but like what else about that experience?
Usually when my family and I travel, we like traveling outside of the country. So it's not really often that we travel within the United States, because most of my family is in New York, New Jersey. We just drive. But flying to South Carolina was definitely unique, because there was no like goal to do certain things like try
Mm-hmm.
out all the excursions, try the different fancy foods,
Right.
or or trying to get a different experience of like what it is like outside of the United States. It was just relaxation. It was no thoughts, no stressors. Um, there was no stress of trying to find the thrill of excitement, you know?
Oh, I love that. I think it's also so cool how you said like there's just no like nothing was planned. It seems like it's kind of like spontaneous almost where
Yes.
you're just traveling and what you see, what you explore, it all just depends on what's happening. I feel like when we take the pressure off of vacation, it's much more enjoyable. Or travel, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I really like how you talked about that. And, I feel like every trip has some amazing food. And I know you talked about this. Like, we weren't trying to try all the fancy foods, but like, what food is standing out to you from that trip?
From that trip, I don't know if I'm allowed to plug in any specific places, but there's this one restaurant called Rudy Royal.
Okay.
This the whole reason why I chose South Carolina to talk about. It was the best food I've ever had in my life.
What kind of food was it?
Everything.
Oh.
It was steak, it was chicken, it was tenders, it was potatoes, it was swordfish. It was just amazing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I cried while eating the food
Right.
because of how great it was. Like, I will never forget that experience. And food really leaves like a lasting
It
impression,
definitely does.
you know, because like you may forget like an experience or a memory, but something that is just unforgettable is
Mm-hmm.
the taste, the smell,
Exactly.
the sound of the bustling restaurant,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the sight of your food sizzling on that plate.
Come on now.
It's just such a unique experience.
Yeah, Isaiah, thank you so much for your vivid imagery and the description of how you felt when that food was brought out to you. Um, yeah, and I think that food is just, like you said, it leaves an impression. So, was there anything in that meal that you were explaining that you tried for the first time that you really enjoyed? Or was everything pretty much like, you know what, I had this before, I'm going to get this again?
It was so good. We went back to that same restaurant 3 times in the span of 3 days. And we refused to try anything else because of how good it was.
Uh-oh.
Like, specifically, it was like a Nashville hot sauce chicken tender that I tried.
Mm-hmm.
And just to like really like dig into the imagery again, um, it was a hot sauce and it was like almost burning. But you know, sometimes when you try certain hot sauces and spices, like it burns your mouth and your eyes start
Yeah.
watering, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just really not necessarily pleasant in comparison to this heat.
Yeah.
Felt warm, like a warm hug.
Uh-oh.
It felt like the spices were dancing on my tongue rather than
Wow.
like assaulting my tongue.
Thank you again for your vivid imagery. And I like the comparison between hot foods that aren't necessarily enjoyable to eat as opposed to hot foods that, you don't mind the little kick. So thank you for sharing that. And just to kind of like switch gears and whatnot, have you ever faced an unexpected challenge while traveling? Like, were you ever late for your flight or something with transportation? Like, do tell.
Jumping outside of my trip to South Carolina, I've been to quite a few countries, specifically like South, like Mexico,
Mm.
South America, the Bahamas, the Caribbean.
Bahama
Um,
Mama.
yeah. One difficulty would be language,
Mm.
specifically traveling to countries where like I don't speak the language, like I don't speak Spanish. It's definitely difficult trying to get that authentic experience,
Right.
you know, traveling to like the inner cities of like different towns and areas where you don't speak the language and you're just struggling to find someone that speaks English.
Right.
And it's definitely like a challenge. However, I feel like that adds to the fun of the experience,
Mm.
you know. Like it could be stressful at times where it's like, oh no, where am I going?
Like, yeah. I know
But
exactly what you mean.
it definitely adds to the excitement of the trip. You know, I'm all about that exploration, the
Mhm.
adventure of traveling.
Yeah, and it's important that you pointed out language because not everybody speaks English. Not everybody speaks your language. So when we're going to these places and we're traveling, we have to kind of like step outside of everybody speaks my language. You know what I mean? And I think that just makes the experience kind of like what you said, like it's more adventurous, trying to figure out what's going on. And yeah, language is very important when you're traveling. And
Yeah, you know, I've definitely experienced like a bunch of different languages being spoken. I
hmm
remember one time I went to Belize and I couldn't even understand anything that was being said
yeah,
because it's such a interesting dialect
right.
on how they speak. And like I remember traveling to Bermuda
You've
and
been all around the world.
mostly on this hemisphere.
Uh huh.
But like I remember traveling to DR and like just to bring up the example of Spanish,
Mm-hmm.
which is like very common down south. Despite it all being one language, there's all different dialects.
Right.
You can't necessarily group someone who speaks Spanish into a Spanish speaker because Dominican Republic Spanish may not sound the exact same as a Mexican Spanish.
Right. Or even Spain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's definitely like nice to see how unique different cultures can be, despite it often being grouped into one area.
I couldn't have said it any better. And this is just something that you would come across once you step outside of American borders. You know what I mean? So, yeah, thank you for sharing that. And after all of these incredible experiences that you've came across while traveling, going to this part of the world, going to this state, what's one place that is still on your bucket list?
Well, I have yet to be on the Eastern Hemisphere.
Cool.
So
Same.
yes, I definitely that's 100% like where I want to go. A couple of places would be Greece,
Mm.
Rome, Japan, Moscow, Germany, Spain. I want to visit Russia. I want to visit Thailand. I really want to just travel across the whole world. I feel like
Yeah.
I've definitely been blessed to see a lot of it and travel to a lot of places,
Mm-hmm.
whether or not it be more than others
Yeah.
or less than others. I've definitely been blessed to see a lot of places, and I just want to see more because like it really expands your perspective to travel to different countries and see that there are people different from you out there, and that is okay,
That
and
is okay.
you can learn a lot from it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure most of our listeners can agree with you about just wanting to travel and to just explore the world, And like you said, you are blessed to have traveled to so many places on the West. You know what I mean? And a lot of people probably haven't ever left the United States. So for that person who has never left the United States but has a desire to travel and maybe a little fearful of what's out there, what advice would you give to that person listening today?
One piece of advice I would give is to
Mm.
plan, because if you fail to plan, you plan to fail.
Come on now.
Because like if you travel to places where like it's completely different from
Yeah,
what you're used to, you don't want to like make a mistake to where you're getting scammed, or you don't want to make the mistake of offending anyone,
absolutely.
and that's very important. You also don't want to make any mistakes as far as traveling where you get stuck somewhere, and that would be very unfortunate. So definitely planning, you know, enough details that are at least going to get you there and get you home.
Yeah, I also think that's so important because, you spoke about just planning in general, but if you go somewhere where you're not really supposed to be, because I know there's this thing with tourists where it's like people know, like the locals know you're a tourist. So if you're going somewhere, that could make you like an easy target. And you just want to be aware of all of those things. So I just feel like planning will just save you like a lot of stress and, danger potentially.
Yeah, the whole point of traveling is to enjoy the experience,
Mhm.
so it's much better to plan and deal with the stress while you're in the safety of your home.
Exactly.
And then when you're out there, like everything is planned, everything is going according to how it's supposed to be. And then even when things go out of plan, you can just view it as a happy little accident,
Yeah.
and move accordingly.
You know what, Isaiah? I couldn't have said it any better. Thank you so much for all of your responses today and just for being so willing to give advice and to just help those who may be interested in traveling with based on your experiences. So, Isaiah, this has been such a fun conversation. Thank you again for sharing all about your adventures and your insights. And, just before we wrap up this show, is there any final thought or travel tip that you would like to leave with our listeners?
One last thing I'd like to say is just if you're hesitant on traveling, just do it.
Just
Just
do it, y'all. Y'all heard him. Just do it.
just do it, you know. You'll never know what you'll find, you know. But it could be good, it could be bad, but it'll be experience that is unique to you and only you. And that's really it.
Well, awesome. Thank you again so much, Isaiah. And thank you so much for just joining me here today.
Thank you so much for inviting me here today. I really enjoyed this.
And to our listeners, thanks for tuning in to the Cafe Damietta podcast right here on WVCR 88.3 The Saints. Stay connected for more stories that bring culture, identity, and community to the forefront. Until next time, safe travels and take care.